Look around you. It is the second week of August, and if you are like most gardeners, you may feel a quiet sense of exhaustion settling over the garden. The spectacular rush of spring now feels like a distant memory. The heavy summer crops, the tomatoes, the sprawling zucchini, the corn, look tired, weathered, and worn by the wind. At this point, it is incredibly easy to mentally check out. You see the empty spaces where early crops once grew, shrug your shoulders, and decide the planting season is finished. You begin putting away the trowels and seed-starting trays, already waiting for next April. But if you do that, you will be making one of the most costly mistakes in home gardening. You will allow weeks of beautiful, golden growing conditions to slip straight through your fingers. What if August is not the end? What if it is actually the beginning of the most rewarding part of the gardening year? Gardeners who truly understand the seasons know a secret. Right now, the soil is like a fully charged battery. It has spent the entire summer beneath the relentless sun, absorbing and holding its warmth. At no other time of year will it be this warm. In April, a seed may sit in cold, wet soil for 14 frustrating days, shivering beneath the surface and struggling to open. But in the warm soil of August, that very same seed can break through the ground in only 3 to 5 days. And here is the biology behind it. The crops you plant now will begin growing during the final stretch of summer, but they will mature through September, October, and November. They will develop as the nights become crisp, the days grow shorter, and the air steadily cools. The same vegetables that became bitter, tough, and quick to bolt in the heat of June can now grow sweet, remarkably tender, and truly exceptional. Cold does not destroy these cool season crops. It completes them. It concentrates their natural sugars and transforms them at the cellular level. While everything around us appears to be slowing down, fading away, and preparing for the long sleep of winter, we are choosing to plant. We are choosing to believe in a second spring. So let us gather our seeds. There are 15 plants that belong in the soil right now. One brief window, 15 new lives. Let us discover them together. Number 1, radishes. Most people think of radishes as a small spring crop. But gardeners who grow the finest radishes know that August is when the real magic begins. In spring, radishes are always racing against the clock as temperatures rise. Plant them too early, and the cold soil makes germination painfully slow. Wait even 1 week too long, and sudden summer heat can trigger bolting. The plant quickly sends up a flower stalk, while the root becomes hollow, dry, and woody, with a harsh, aggressively spicy flavor. In August, radishes experience the exact opposite. Sow the seeds directly into warm soil at a depth of ½ an inch, and they can germinate with remarkable speed, often within only 4 to 5 days. As the seedlings continue growing into September, shorter days and falling temperatures begin working in their favor. The cooler weather slows their development just enough to keep the roots firm, crisp, and exceptionally mild, with a gentle peppery sweetness. To grow them now, space the seeds about 1 inch apart. And here is a professional trick for dealing with hot summer soil. Sow the seeds in the late evening, then scatter a light layer of ice cubes or crushed ice over the row. This briefly cools the soil around the seeds, helping prevent them from becoming trapped in heat-induced dormancy. You can have fresh radishes on your table in only 22 to 28 days. But always remember the golden rule of growing radishes. Harvest them on time. A radish left in the soil even 3 days beyond its ideal harvest window can quickly become woody and bitter. Isn't life sometimes like the radish? We spend so much time rushing, trying to grow as quickly as possible beneath the heat of expectation, only to become hollow inside. What if the true secret to sweetness is not growing faster, but learning to grow as the world around us begins to cool? Number 2, spinach. If you have ever watched spinach bolt and die before you could harvest enough leaves for a single salad, August offers you a second chance. Spinach is a plant naturally made for cold weather. When spinach is planted in spring, it enters a losing race against rising temperatures and lengthening days. The moment daylight crosses a certain threshold, the plant stops focusing on leaf production, sends up a flower stalk, and begins turning bitter. But in late summer, everything changes. The soil is still warm enough to encourage germination, while the days are becoming shorter. Spinach establishes its roots in the remaining summer warmth, and when September arrives, it naturally settles into its cool season rhythm. The leaves that develop in the crisp air of October are sweeter, more tender, and much richer in flavor than anything you are likely to harvest in spring. For an August planting, wait until the second half of the month. Spinach seeds contain a built-in survival mechanism. When soil temperatures rise above 85 degrees Fahrenheit, they may refuse to germinate. This condition is known as thermodormancy. To overcome it, use a method called seed priming. About 1 week before planting, soak the seeds in room temperature water for 12 hours. Then place them on a damp paper towel inside a closed container and keep them in a cool room for 1 or 2 days until they begin to pre-sprout. Plant them immediately at a depth of ½ an inch and keep the soil consistently moist. Choose slow-bolting heirloom varieties, such as Bloomsdale Long-Standing. When harvesting, remove only the outer leaves and leave the central crown untouched. With this method, one planting can continue feeding you throughout autumn and survive frosts reaching into the upper 20s. It makes you think, doesn't it? Sometimes we force ourselves to keep producing and creating even when the environment around us feels too hot and demanding. Perhaps we also need to wait for the cooler, quieter seasons of life before our sweetest and strongest qualities can finally emerge. Number 3. Lettuce. There is a special kind of disappointment that only gardeners understand. Biting into a leaf of summer lettuce and discovering that it is filled with bitter, milky sap. June and July can be brutal for lettuce, but late August gives us the chance to reclaim our fresh salads. Like spinach, lettuce seeds can suffer from thermodormancy. They may refuse to germinate when soil temperatures rise above 80 degrees Fahrenheit. If you simply scatter the seeds across soil baking beneath the mid-August sun, they may rot or remain completely dormant, leaving you wondering why nothing ever appeared. The secret to growing lettuce in August is controlling the microclimate around the seeds. Sow them in the afternoon shade created by taller crops, such as tomato plants or climbing beans, where the soil may be 10 to 15 degrees cooler. Moisten the soil deeply before planting. Sow the seeds very close to the surface, beneath a light dusting of fine compost, and cover the bed with a thin, damp cloth or wet newspaper for the first 5 to 7 days. This simple shading method keeps the surface cool, moist, and protected. Once the seedlings are established and reach about 2 inches tall, they can handle the remaining summer heat far more easily. Choose heat-tolerant or slow-bolting varieties, such as the beautiful Austrian heirloom Forellenschluss, whose speckled red and green leaves resemble the markings of a mountain trout. Keep the plants growing quickly, with steady moisture, because lettuce develops its finest flavor when it grows fast. Harvest with the cut-and-come-again method. Remove only the outer leaves while leaving the center intact, allowing the plant to continue producing fresh growth. In life, we often find ourselves beneath the harsh, relentless glare of outside pressure, slowly becoming bitter. But when we find a little shade, a quiet sanctuary, or a protective boundary, we can continue growing with sweetness, tenderness, and resilience. Where is the shade in your life right now? Number 4. Kale. This is the undisputed superstar of the winter garden, and when you plant it now, you are preparing yourself for a harvest that can become nothing short of legendary. Many people have a complicated relationship with kale. They buy it from the grocery store during spring or summer, find the leaves tough, fibrous, and intensely bitter, and decide they simply do not like it. But that is often because they have never tasted kale touched by frost. Kale has a dramatic and beautiful relationship with cold weather. When temperatures fall below freezing, the plant begins a powerful physiological survival response. To stop the water inside its cells from freezing and rupturing the tissue, kale rapidly breaks down its stored starches and converts them into simple sugars. Those sugars act like a natural antifreeze, lowering the freezing point of the sap inside the cells. The result is remarkable. Kale leaves harvested in November or December, after several hard frosts, become incredibly sweet, tender, and complex. They taste like an entirely different food. Sow kale seeds directly in August, about 1/4 of an inch deep, and space the plants 12 inches apart. The seeds will germinate easily in the warmth of late summer, allowing the plants to build strong root systems and sturdy canopies of leaves throughout September. When the first freezes arrive in October, the cold begins working like a master chef, sweetening every leaf. Varieties such as lacinato, commonly known as dinosaur kale, and the delicate red Russian are excellent choices for this late-season transition. A single plant can continue producing through the entire winter, even when temperatures fall to 20 degrees Fahrenheit. What a powerful lesson kale offers us. The bitter, freezing cold of winter does not destroy the plant. It becomes the very force that unlocks its sweetness. Could the coldest and most difficult seasons of our own lives also be transforming something raw within us into a deeper and sweeter kind of strength? Number 5. Carrots. A carrot pulled from the soil in November, after the chill of autumn has finished its work, can feel like a revelation. It becomes so intensely sweet and crisp that it seems as though you have discovered a secret the grocery store has hidden from you your entire life. Like kale, carrots begin converting starches into sugars as the soil cools, concentrating their flavor in the quiet darkness beneath the ground. But before you can enjoy that sweet November harvest, you must first overcome the greatest challenge of growing carrots in August: germination. Carrot seeds are extremely small and delicate. Because they must be planted shallowly, only about 1/4 of an inch deep, they remain in the very top layer of soil. During the dry, burning heat of August, that surface layer can lose all its moisture within only a few hours, drying and killing the seeds before they ever have the chance to sprout. Here is the essential technique used by professional growers. After sowing the seeds directly into loose, stone-free soil, water the bed thoroughly. Then place a piece of damp burlap or a wooden board directly over the seeded row. This creates a physical barrier that locks moisture into the soil and shields the seeds from the baking sun. Check beneath the covering every morning. The moment you see the first tiny feathery green shoots breaking through the surface, remove it immediately so the seedlings can receive light. For an autumn harvest, choose short, compact varieties such as Nantes or Little Finger. These mature much faster than large storage carrots and can develop beautifully before the ground begins to freeze. Carrots ask us to keep the soil consistently moist in the dark, hidden places where we cannot see what is happening. Isn't that the very essence of faith? Trusting that beneath the heavy, dry coverings of our present circumstances, something beautiful, sweet, and life-giving is quietly taking root. Number 6. Swiss chard. If one vegetable can serve as the perfect bridge between seasons, it is Swiss chard. This remarkable plant is a resilient survivor. It does not bolt in the blistering heat of August, the way spinach does, and it does not collapse when the freezing frosts of November arrive. Instead, it keeps producing steadily, day after day and week after week. Sow Swiss chard in August at a depth of 1/4 inch, and the seeds will sprout vigorously in the warm soil. By October, the garden will be filled with thick, crinkled leaves and brilliantly colored stems that look more like ornamental flowers than food. But Swiss chard holds a culinary secret that many people overlook. Its leaves and stems should be treated as two completely different ingredients. The green leaves are soft and delicate, cooking down in a hot pan with olive oil and garlic in less than 2 minutes, much like spinach. The thick, juicy stems are far more substantial and need an additional 4 to 5 minutes of cooking. When harvesting, separate the stems from the leaves. Place the stems in the pan first, then add the leaves at the very end. One plant gives you 2 distinct textures in one spectacular meal. Choose varieties such as Bright Lights or Rainbow to bring a joyful burst of color into the fading autumn garden. Swiss chard reveals the beauty of versatility. It does not complain about the lingering summer heat, and it does not fear the cold that winter will bring. It simply adapts, changes its structure, and continues standing strong, sharing its brilliant colors with everyone who passes by. How can we develop that same steady, unshakable resilience in our own lives? Number 7. Arugula. If you are impatient and want fast results, arugula is the plant for you. It is the true speed champion of the autumn garden, growing from a tiny seed into fresh salad greens in as little as 21 to 25 days. Plant it in the middle of August, and you may be eating fresh, homegrown salads before September even begins. But speed is not the only reason to plant arugula in August. The real reason is flavor. Arugula, grown in the intense, dry heat of midsummer, develops leaves that are extremely sharp, mustard-like, and so peppery that they can easily overpower your taste buds. But when arugula matures as temperatures begin falling in September, its flavor becomes far gentler and more balanced. The harsh bite softens into a clean, nutty, lightly spicy taste that can elevate almost any dish. The most common mistake gardeners make with arugula is allowing the leaves to become too large. Once they reach 5 or 6 inches long, they can turn tough, stringy, and intensely bitter. Harvest them while they are still small, between 2 and 3 inches long, when their texture is crisp and their flavor is sweet and mild. Use scissors to cut the leaves about 1 inch above the soil, leaving the roots undisturbed. Fresh growth will soon rise from the base, providing another harvest in only 10 to 12 days. Sow one small patch now, and another patch 2 weeks later. This simple succession planting will provide a continuous supply of perfectly peppery greens all the way through November. Arugula reminds us that sometimes the sharpest and most difficult parts of our personalities are simply reactions to an environment that has become too harsh and overheated. When the air begins to cool and we finally give ourselves enough space to breathe, that bitterness can soften into a gentle warmth that brings flavor to everyone around us. Number 8. Beets. Growing beets in August allows you to claim 2 rewards from a single planting. Most people think only about the root, the sweet and earthy jewel developing beneath the soil. But experienced beet growers understand that one seed can provide 2 completely different harvests. Beginning around 30 days after planting, long before the roots are fully developed, you can start harvesting the beet greens. These leafy tops are tender, mildly earthy, and taste like a delicate, premium spinach. Sautéed with olive oil and garlic, they become one of the most satisfying and nutrient-rich meals the autumn garden can provide. Then, when October arrives, the roots reach maturity, naturally sweetened by the cooling soil. However, encouraging beet seeds to germinate in hot August ground can be difficult. What we call a beet seed is actually a small, dry, cork-like fruit containing a cluster of 2 to 4 true seeds. Its protective outer coating contains natural, water-soluble chemical inhibitors that prevent germination until the seed experiences heavy rainfall. To overcome this barrier, use a scientific method known as seed priming. Place the beet seeds in a jar filled with room-temperature water. Every 30 minutes, pour out the water and replace it with fresh water. Repeat this process 6 times. Doing so washes away the natural growth inhibitors while thoroughly hydrating the cork-like coating. Afterward, spread the seeds on paper towels and allow them to dry overnight. Then plant them the following day. Instead of taking the usual 10 days, they may emerge in only 4 to 5 days. Consider growing the Italian heirloom variety Chioggia, famous for its remarkable concentric rings of pink and white that resemble a piece of modern art. Beets teach us about the many layers of life. Sometimes we must wash away the old protective barriers we created to survive the dry seasons of our past before we can finally crack open and begin growing. What old inhibitors do you need to wash away today? Number 9. Broccoli. Broccoli has a timing problem that has disappointed countless backyard gardeners. They purchase young plants in April, set them into the garden in May, and then watch them struggle through early summer. The moment the heat of June arrives, the plants begin to bolt. Their tight green heads loosen, burst into yellow flowers, become woody, and are eventually ruined. Many gardeners decide that broccoli is simply too difficult to grow, so they give up. But broccoli is not difficult. It was only planted during the wrong season. This vegetable needs to mature in the cool, gentle air of autumn, not beneath the harsh heat of summer. August is the ideal starting point for an autumn broccoli crop. Seeds started indoors in July, or strong transplants purchased in August, can be moved into the garden just as the most extreme heat begins to weaken. Broccoli thrives in temperatures between 60 and 70 degrees Fahrenheit. A head that develops in the cool 55-degree air of October will be crisp, sweet, tightly formed, and entirely free from the bitterness often found in spring-grown crops. Space the plants 12 to 24 inches apart. Broccoli is a demanding feeder, so work a generous amount of rich organic compost into the soil before planting. And remember this essential tip. After harvesting the large central head, do not pull the plant from the ground. Continue watering it. During the following weeks, smaller but extremely flavorful side shoots will keep developing from the leaf joints, extending your harvest far into November. How often do we abandon a dream or project because we assume we are not capable of succeeding, when the truth is that we were only trying to force it to bloom in the wrong season? Some of our greatest efforts simply need the cooler, more mature autumn of our lives before they can form beautifully. Number 10. Mustard greens. If you want bold, adventurous flavors that can awaken your entire kitchen, mustard greens belong in your garden this month. They are ready to harvest only 30 to 40 days after sowing, growing remarkably fast while requiring almost no effort. Mustard greens are deeply connected to culinary tradition, especially in the American South, where they are slowly cooked for hours with smoked meats to create a rich, comforting, and deeply savory dish. But when harvested young and tender, mustard leaves are equally remarkable in fresh salads, adding a lively peppery kick that can make ordinary lettuce seem dull. Yet timing makes all the difference. Mustard greens planted during the scorching heat of early summer can develop an extremely sharp, almost chemical intensity that is far too powerful for many people. When sown during the second half of August, however, the plants establish themselves as summer begins to fade and mature, while September temperatures grow cooler. This cool weather development softens their sharpness, creating a beautiful and harmonious balance between natural sweetness and spice. Sow the seeds directly into the soil at a depth of ½ inch, then thin the young seedlings as they grow. Harvest the leaves while they are still young, leaving the central growing tip untouched, so the plant can continue producing for several more weeks. Mustard greens show us that strength and intensity can be beautiful when they are tempered by the right surroundings. Our passion does not need to be silenced, and our intensity does not need to be suppressed. It simply needs the cool, steadying seasons of life to discover its most delicious and perfect balance. Number 11. Bok choy. Bok choy is one of the most beautiful and rewarding vegetables you can grow at home, yet it is often overlooked. Plant baby bok choy varieties now, and they can be ready for your table in only 30 days. Full-size varieties need 45 to 60 days. Either way, you can enjoy an abundant harvest well before the first hard freeze arrives. If your only experience with bok choy comes from a grocery store stir-fry, growing it yourself will completely transform the way you see this vegetable. Freshly harvested bok choy has an extraordinary juicy crunch and a mild, sweet, clean flavor filled with moisture. That freshness begins fading within only a few hours of harvest. The store-bought version, after spending days inside trucks and cold storage facilities, is only a shadow of what bok choy can truly be. Bok choy seeds do not germinate well when the soil temperature rises above 80 degrees Fahrenheit. To grow them successfully in August, choose a location that receives shade during the afternoon and water the bed regularly to help keep the soil cool. Once the plants become established, they will grow with remarkable speed as the autumn days begin to cool. Keep the soil consistently moist to prevent the plants from bolting too early. Harvest them when they are compact, firm, and standing upright. Bok choy reminds us of the value of genuine freshness. Some things in life cannot be packaged, preserved, or transported across great distances without losing their essential spirit, crispness, and joy. Certain experiences must be harvested and enjoyed exactly where they are created, in the present moment. Are you truly living in the present today? Number 12. Kohlrabi. Walk through the produce section of almost any grocery store, and you will rarely see kohlrabi. Even when it is available, most shoppers pass by without stopping, completely puzzled by its unusual appearance. It looks unlike almost anything else in the plant kingdom. A round, swollen, turnip-like stem growing entirely above the soil, with leafy branches reaching out in every direction like a small green spaceship. But for gardeners planting in August, kohlrabi is an absolute must-grow crop. It matures in 45 to 60 days and prefers the cooler, shortening weeks of September to develop its magnificent swollen stems. And what about the flavor? It is incredibly delicious. Peel away the thick, fibrous outer skin, and you will discover crisp, snow-white flesh inside. Its flavor tastes like a wonderful combination of a mild broccoli stem and a sweet, juicy apple. You do not even have to cook it. Simply slice it thinly, sprinkle a little sea salt over the top, and enjoy it raw. It is one of the finest snacks the garden can provide. Crisp, refreshing, and unexpectedly sweet. You can also roast kohlrabi with olive oil, allowing it to develop a deep, rich, and nutty sweetness. When planting it in August, keep the soil consistently moist. If the plant suffers through drought, its swollen stem can become extremely tough, woody, and stringy. Harvest the bulb when it reaches between 2 and 3 inches in diameter. roughly the size of a tennis ball. Allow it to grow much larger, and the interior may become pithy, losing the crisp, juicy quality that makes it so special. Kohlrabi teaches us not to judge anything only by its outer appearance. Some of the strangest, most unusual, and most complicated-looking things in this world may hold the sweetest and most refreshing centers, as long as we are willing to take the time to peel away their tough outer layers. Who or what have you judged too quickly recently? Number 13. Turnips. Turnips have earned a terrible reputation. Many people imagine tough, bitter, starchy roots that were once fed to farm animals or eaten only as a final option during periods of famine. But that impression usually comes from eating old, oversized turnips grown for long-term storage. A fresh turnip planted in August and harvested when it reaches the size of a golf ball is an entirely different vegetable. It is mild, crisp, slightly sweet, and tender enough to slice raw into a salad. Instead of tasting like a heavy root vegetable, it behaves more like a refined gourmet radish. Turnips also provide two separate harvests. Long before the roots are ready, the leafy tops can begin supplying a continuous crop of highly nutritious greens from around 30 days after planting. For the finest turnip experience, look for hakure, the celebrated Japanese salad turnip. Its roots are smooth, pure white, and remarkably sweet when eaten fresh from the soil. To grow turnips successfully during the heat of August, try sowing them with a paper grid method. Place strips of wet newspaper, 6 sheets thick, across the prepared garden bed, leaving narrow, open furrows between the strips. Sow the turnip seeds inside those furrows and cover them with weed-free potting soil. The wet newspaper slows moisture loss, helps cool the soil, and prevents weeds from taking over. Keep the bed well watered and harvest the roots before they grow larger than 2 inches in diameter. The turnip is a beautiful reminder of the possibility of redemption. Even things that have been dismissed, misunderstood, and unloved throughout history can become sweet, valuable, and celebrated when we change the way we approach them, care for them properly, and harvest them at the right time. Number 14. Collard greens. If kale is the superstar of the winter garden, collard greens are its undisputed warriors. They are among the toughest, most cold-hardy, and resilient leafy vegetables you could ever grow. While other plants wilt, freeze, and collapse into mush at the first arrival of winter, collards continue standing tall. They can endure freezing temperatures down to 20 degrees Fahrenheit with remarkable ease. When sown in August, collard plants use the remaining summer warmth to produce enormous, deep green leaves. Then, as November frost arrives, the same starch-to-sugar conversion that sweetens kale begins inside the collard leaves, but with even greater intensity. The strong, slightly bitter leaves of September are transformed into greens that are rich, sweet, deeply savory, and almost unmatched in flavor. Space the plants 18 inches apart because they will grow very large. Begin harvesting from the lower, outer leaves, leaving the central growth untouched so the plant can continue rising upward. In regions with milder winters, one planting made in August can continue feeding you throughout winter and all the way into early spring. Collard greens stand as a powerful testament to the beauty of endurance. They do not attempt to escape the winter, and they do not demand artificial warmth. Instead, they drive their roots deeper into the frozen earth, thicken their leaves, and allow the cold air to refine their character, transforming hardship into a rich and nourishing sweetness. When the freezing winds of adversity move through your own life, will you choose to wither, or will you stand tall like the collard green and allow the cold to refine your soul? Number 15. Scallions. We have reached the final vegetable on our list. It may not be the most dramatic or unusual crop, but it is undoubtedly one of the most useful and practical vegetables you can plant this month. Scallions, also known as green onions. Having fresh green onions growing only a few steps from the kitchen door, always ready to be snipped for eggs, salads, soups, or tacos, is one of those small daily luxuries that makes the entire experience of home gardening feel worthwhile. Sow scallion seeds in August at a depth of 1/4 inch, and they should begin sprouting within 7 to 10 days. They ask for almost nothing from you, only a narrow strip of soil about 6 inches wide along the edge of a garden bed, regular watering, and a little sunlight. Within 60 days, they will be ready to harvest. But there is one essential harvesting technique that can multiply the amount they produce. Do not pull the entire plant out of the soil. Instead, Use scissors to cut the green tops about 1 inch above ground level. Leave the white base and roots firmly in the soil. Within 10 to 14 days, fresh green shoots will begin rising from the base, providing a second and sometimes even a third complete harvest before winter finally arrives. Scallions reveal the power of simple, quiet usefulness. They do not demand the most important place in the garden. They do not require costly fertilizers, and they never create a fuss. They simply provide their dependable, familiar flavor, day after day. They also teach us a beautiful lesson about regrowth. Even when we are cut down, as long as our roots remain firmly anchored in the earth, we will always find a way to rise and grow again. Outro, a covenant with the future. And so, here we are, standing at the beautiful yet bittersweet threshold between summer and autumn. The air is growing cooler, the shadows are becoming longer, and it is incredibly easy to look across the tired summer garden beds and believe the story has already ended. But now, we understand something different. We know that August is not the end. It is the doorway into one of the most beautiful, flavorful, and rewarding seasons of the gardening year. Holding a handful of seeds and pressing them into the warm, dark soil this month is much more than an ordinary garden task. It is a quiet act of courage. It is a brave choice to remain engaged, to refuse to surrender when everything looks tired, and to plant hope for the future instead. It is a promise we make to ourselves that we will still be here when the time comes to harvest the sweetness that only cold weather can create. So, my friends, what will you choose? Will you stand aside and quietly watch the garden fade, or will you take up your trowel, walk into the warm evening sunlight, and begin planting your second spring? Which one of these 15 vegetables will you place into the soil first? Share your answer in the comments below, and remember to include your gardening zone. Someone growing in the exact same climate may be reading those comments right now, hoping to find a neighbor. Thank you for spending this afternoon with me in the garden. If you enjoyed this journey, press the subscribe button. Become part of our Earthly Delights family, and let us continue growing together. Until next time, keep your hands in the soil, your head beneath the sun, and your heart open to the magic of the earth. Happy gardening!